So friends, for today's video, I'm going to be doing 3 different things in one. I'm going to be going through some of my DNFs from the second quarter of the year. I'm also going to be discussing some books that I'm going to be unhauling, and then I'm going to be going through what I call library saves. And even though that probably doesn't really need some elaboration, just to clarify, I like periodically going through and mentioning the books I was able to get through my local library, just as a way to kind of hype up libraries in general, but also to really illustrate how much you can utilize your libraries and how much money you can save through your libraries, both in physical copies and in audiobooks. So I'm going to start with the library saves. I did do a library saves video for the first quarter of the year, and in it I mentioned, it's I think worth mentioning again, that my local library did this adorable event, I guess you could say, where they brought in miniature ponies and a miniature donkey to have children read to. And these miniature horses and donkey were therapy animals, so they're very, very calm. They like being read to. The local library also has kids come in and they can read to therapy dogs too, which is so cute. But anyway, when I saw the therapy miniature horses and donkey on their Instagram page, it was right around the time of my birthday, and I was like, well, this feels like a perfect birthday present. And we were basically the only adults that checked out books to read to the donkey. The miniature horses were very cute. They let 3 people in at a time because there's 2 miniature horses and a miniature donkey. And so you can like peek through the window of this little door that leads to this other room, and you can like see how cute they are. And they have basically 3 kids at a time for each of the animals. And my husband and I, of course, were like, let the kids go first. We're not going to be those adults that are like, move, it's my turn in line. Point is, we were like, donkey, 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 because we thought the donkey was so cute. And then we got to read to the donkey because the girl in front of us, the donkey was next. She's like, I want to read to one of the horses. And we were like, yes. So we got to read to Josie, was the donkey's name. Again, I talked about this already, but I think it's worth talking about again because it's so cute. It's so cute. It was right around the time of my birthday, and it felt like it was just for me. And then shortly after that, we went hiking because it was back when the weather was nice and not triple digits and 110 degrees in Arizona. It sucks. But anyway, back in March, the weather was still nice. We went hiking, and then I saw wild donkeys, and I was like, donkeys everywhere. And my mom decided that a donkey is my spirit animal, and I'm like, well, I don't know how I feel about that, Mom, because I love snow leopards, and I'm not actually saying, like, I'm offended or that it's, like, no, not true. This is so random. I'm just telling you the library's great because they had a donkey. I'm like, Mom, I love snow leopards. And she's like, I think your animal's a donkey. So I guess that's what I have a connection with now, are donkeys. All that to say, let's talk about the library saves. A Letter to the Luminous Deep. I also was able to get an ARC through the publisher, so I'm really grateful for that. And we'll talk about this one a little bit here in the latter half of the video. But the audiobook itself, I was also able to get through my local library. My library, specifically the apps that have audiobooks, would be Hoopla and Libby. All of the ones I'm going to be talking about today, I was able to get from Libby specifically. The difference between the two is that Hoopla, if it's available, you can just check it out. When I say available, I mean if it's in their catalog. There's no, somebody already has this, so you have to wait up to 3 weeks for it. There's not that kind of a thing. Whereas with Libby, it's much more as if it's a physical copy and you do have to wait in line. So Libby, these ones I did have to wait for, but they're how I was able to access all the ones I'm going to talk about. Hoopla tends to be a lot better for backlist things, which actually Hoopla, I was able to get Howl's Moving Castle. So that's untrue. There was a Hoopla thing, and it was Howl's Moving Castle, and it was a lot of fun to listen to that. But anyway, moving on. Next up, we have Dragon Fruit, another one that I was able to listen to through Libby. The physical copy, I do work with Book of the Month from time to time. I do have my own subscription, actually, to Book of the Month because they now have their own audiobook service, and I do actually like using them for, one, my husband, because we have pretty different reading tastes, but then also because there are a fair amount of my anticipated releases that pop up on there. That being said, this isn't sponsored by them. I just want to let you know I do work with them from time to time. But I had already gotten Dragon Fruit, the physical copy, through Book of the Month because I like immersion reading. I was hoping that I would be able to check out the audiobook through the library, and I was able to, so yay. And then A Botanical Daughter. This is one where both the physical copy and the audiobook I was able to check out. Sadly, this is going to be in the DNF, so I'll be talking about this one here in a little bit. But Not negative feelings or anything like that. We'll discuss. But I am grateful that and when I call them library saves, it's in part for things like this. Had I ran out and bought this and then used one of my audiobook credits for this, that would have been a decent amount of money to pour into this story that ultimately I didn't end up continuing on with. So I'm really grateful for the library for that. Next up, we have City of Stardust, audiobook got from the library. I'm just going to go through these last couple really quick. Song of the Six Realms, got the audiobook from the library. The last two I might have mentioned in the first video from this year that I did for library saves, but The Prisoner's Throne and Guns of the Dawn, I got the audiobooks as well. So this one was a heavy audiobooks month. A lot of the physical copies I already had because some of them are backlist. I did get some self-pub books through the library. The Relic of the Gods is the third book in the Echo Saga, Empire of Dirt. I haven't had the chance to talk about Empire of Dirt yet, but I did get the physical copy from the library, and The Relic of the Gods, I think, is the third one's name. The physical copy I currently have from the library, but I just haven't had a chance to talk about those yet, but more library safe. So library really is fantastic for being able to read a lot of the things that are on my TBR. The downside, of course, that I want to mention is that you don't always time, it's hard to time things because things are obviously being checked out by other people as well. So as far as TBRs and being a heavy planner kind of person that I am, it does conflict a little bit with that. But for me, the positives outweigh the negatives. I know it does mean that sometimes I'll say, I'm going to try to read this month, and then I don't get around to it, at least for a while, if even within the quarter. But that's a downside I'm willing to take on just because I think supporting libraries is really, really important. They do so much for the community and they're wonderful. Now moving though into the Dnf'S and the Unhaul, these are somewhat tied to each other. All these are somewhat tied to each other, which is why I decided to combine all of these into one thing. So I mentioned DNFing this one in the first quarter, but I just want to mention that I am going to sell my copy on Pango, which I think the last time I did an unhaul and sold some things on Pango, I think the things sold before the video even went live. And I didn't put this on sale until the night before because I didn't want somebody to watch the video and I hadn't even put the things up yet. The problem was because of that, I had put the things on sale and then I think they sold before the video went up. So if you do look on Pango and you don't see these, I'm really sorry. They sell fast because I don't upsell. If I upsell a little bit, it's more so for shipping costs. But otherwise, I don't, as somebody who likes physical copies, who likes owning books, who likes special editions of books, so many of us are so frustrated when we know something cost $40 initially and now somebody's selling it for $200. So I don't do that, and hence the books end up selling pretty quick. But the first one I'm going to mention would be A Tempest of Tea. This was one where I was really excited about it. I really liked the idea of it. It was compared to Six of Crows. I definitely could understand that comparison when I picked this up. But I just felt like the book, it seemed as though it started several chapters into the story, and I never really felt like I was getting my feet firmly planted on the ground. And once it started moving, which is pretty quick, as it progressed through the plot, I was like, I just don't feel engaged, unfortunately. I still want to read something else by this author. I've heard the other duology, though, We Hunt the Flame, is quite good. So I'm still definitely planning to check that out, but I am unhauling this, and I did DNF this. I had mentioned that I had an arc of Letter to the Luminous Deep, a Letter to the Luminous Deep. So I am really grateful to Orbit for sending this to me. This one was just not working out, and I am going to donate this one. I don't sell arcs just because they were already given to me for free, and I don't want to then turn around and try to make a profit off of these, so I will be donating this. But I am going to have in the description bar a link to someone else's review so that if you are interested in this, you can check out more in-depth thoughts, because obviously I didn't finish it, so I can't provide those. But this is written in letters, which I knew going in, and the concept didn't bother me. I just don't know if I realized how it's literally all letters, and it's kind of like, have you ever gone to see a musical, whether it be a movie or literally a musical, and you're like, oh, like, they're always singing? Because most of the time there are musicals where they sing, they have certain numbers, and then they like talk to each other between the numbers. And then there are ones where they sing everything, even if they like hurt themselves, they're like saying ow while singing at the same time, and you're like, can we just talk for like a minute, please? That kind of feeling. That's kind of how I felt about this. So it was a lot of letters. Again, conceptually, not necessarily a deal breaker. However, the voices between the different letters were not particularly distinct, and there are several different characters. It's not just two people writing to each other, and they write about each other in the letters, and it was a little convoluted. I wish there was more distinction with the voices. It made it feel like I was listening to the same person, just suddenly swapping bodies. So it didn't really end up working for me, unfortunately. But I really like the concept. I think anytime authors are willing to take a chance, whether it's a narrative decision, a perspective decision, I always want to give that a try. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But I still appreciate when authors are doing something a little bit different. That one just was a miss for me. This next one is one that I read 70 to 80% of it. I didn't dislike it. I just didn't care. And that would be Sword Catchers. So I also got this through Fairy Loot. And I will say I'm not a big fan of this cover, but the edges are spectacular. Those are fantastic. And then the naked hardback is very, very nice. Plus the book has a ribbon. So it is a nice edition of the book. I technically read the first Shadowhunters book in high school. I don't remember it. I just remember it has that trope of like, are you my sibling or are you my boyfriend? And I don't like that trope. So I didn't love that book. And I didn't continue on with Shadowhunters. But I have heard that there are certain books within that series as a whole, because I know that it branches out into other areas, that there are some that some people say like, oh, I would recommend that you read the originals just so you have context for this series over here, because this series is definitely worth reading. It's kind of like a Cosmere or Realm of the Elderling situation, where certain things people encourage you to push through for more context and a better reading experience of different parts of the series. So I'm not opposed to that. But I was like, okay, this is a new series. It's her first adult fantasy series. I think I would like to start here first before trying to commit to any other giant series of hers. And it's a pretty chonky book. It's very long, which I was not opposed to, but it felt like a lot of things I had seen before mixed together, but never really feeling all that unique. And I'm not saying just because they have the same name, because there is a character that has the same name as Kel from Shades of Magic. It's not just that they have the same name, it's that like their personalities and their role and their relationship to a royal figure is so similar to Shades of Magic that it felt like a little too much. I'm not trying to imply that I think she's plagiarizing or stealing ideas or anything. I'm just saying, for me, the reader, it was hard for me to feel like this story stood enough on its own for me to feel like I wasn't just constantly comparing it to Shades of Magic. And then there was another character that entered the picture, and I just felt like maybe this is a thing of her works. So if it is, you can tell me. But it just felt like she was setting every character up to potentially have the hots for every other character that was introduced. Like literally, she would interact with the female perspective that showed up would interact with one of the male perspectives, and it'd be like, oh, do they have the hots for each other? And then she would have some kind of like, she has to go on some quest basically with the other brother, and it's like, oh, do they have the hots for each other? And then sometimes the brothers, like one of the two brothers would I'm not saying the brothers had the hots for each other, which would be on par with like the tropes that she uses apparently, but that's not what I was gonna say. But one brother would go interact with some guy, and then you'd be like, do these guys have the hots for each other? I feel like they kind of do. It just felt like everybody had the hots for each other, and I'm like, that's fine. But it did make it so that no one interaction it didn't feel specific to the character. It just felt like everything was sort of surface level, so that we can continue to have this like, wow, they're kind of hot actually, and they're pretty good looking, and also, wow, like we had to go through this alley and our bodies are kind of like pressed up close to each other and they're pretty hot. Did you know they're hot? And then it's like that same thing, but like instead of in an alley, it's like, oh, it's an open area, like a garden. And it's like, oh, I just can't get over how, like, their eyes are. But it's just, like, it's the same thing, it feels like, with various different characters. And I'm like, there's a cool plot in here. There's actually a cool plot in here. But it's so much of just this kind of angstiness, which I'm not opposed to necessarily. It's just this angstiness everywhere with everybody. I kind of want... I don't know. I liked the friendship dynamic. There was a friendship dynamic between the girl in the story and this other woman. And I liked a lot of the world building. Again, it just didn't really feel distinct enough for me. And the more the story went on, I liked it, but I also didn't care. So I DNF'd it because I was like, I just don't really see myself. If any of the characters died, I'd be like, oh no, well, what are you going to do? I guess probably not the book for me. So moving on. Next up, Loyally Luke. I decided to give this one a go kind of on a whim because there is through the app Libra FM. If you don't know what Libra FM is, it's an audiobook service, but the profits go toward indie bookstores. You can literally set up your subscription to help specific stores. So I have it set to help Changing Hands in Phoenix because it's a great used bookstore and I love it. So anyway, I have this audiobook subscription and every month they have a ton of books that are brand new releases that if you are a reviewer of any kind, then you can sign up for their influencer program and this huge selection of brand new books every month. You can download 10 of those for free without using your credits. It's absurd. So I have in the past gotten some audiobooks through them that I'm like, oh my gosh, that was an anticipated release. Awesome. Which is great, which is why the library saves actually isn't an even bigger list because sometimes the things I am looking forward to reading are through Libra FM. That said, Loyally Luke is a contemporary romance, and one thing that had been brought up in the video I did about male characters, because I did a video, 2 writers from readers, where all of you submitted your thoughts. Female characters and a separate one for male characters. And there was a comment about just in general wanting more perspectives with male characters. And I did give a list of a bunch of books that have male protagonists, which I was kind of shocked because I was like, I feel like that's not a difficult thing to find. But we all exist within different bubbles, and so maybe the bubble that particular commenter exists within, a lot of the books that get recommended maybe don't have male perspectives. So I did say, though, because it's hard in those comments for people to be able to really express a ton without having to leave a really long, paragraph or multiple paragraphs. So it's possible that they were specifically referring to certain genres as opposed to just as a whole. But one area where I was like, if you're referring to romance, I definitely agree there's hardly any books out there with male perspectives, or at least from what I've noticed. And this one, called Loyally Luke, was a contemporary romance that had a male main character, so I was like, okay, this would be a perfect opportunity for me to try to remedy my blind spot when it comes to having male perspectives in fantasy romance or contemporary romance stories. And I just pretty much immediately DNF'd it. I feel bad because it's not really the narrator's fault, but I think that the writing of the characters, the narrator trying to read their dialogue, if you don't know, I live in America. There's a lot of different accents in America, one of which is like a Southern accent. And a lot of people will do a Southern accent in America, like just being goofy and messing around. And also, I have a question. Do British people randomly do American accents the way Americans will just randomly start doing really bad British accents? Like, do you guys ever just break out into a British accent for those of you that are American, do you ever just break out into British accents for no reason? And then if you're British, do you ever just break out into American accents for no reason? And if you live elsewhere and you do break out into accents from other countries for no reason, where are you from and what countries' accents do you pull from? Why is that a thing? But anyway, point is, people will do like, oh gosh, Billy John over there was going, like they'll do really cheesy Southern accents that don't actually sound very good. So I'm not opposed to a narrator having a Southern accent if the characters are Southern. But the dialogue combined with the accents, like it felt kind of, I just didn't, I didn't like it. I guess that's the best way. I just didn't really like it. And I was like, maybe if I just read the book by itself. But it was just the dialogue, the way the characters talk to each other, the way the sisters of the main character would talk to each other. It was not my favorite. And the main character had a little bit of like, I'm just a helpless guy, and my goodness, that woman has good looking legs, but also she seems like all posh and whatnot, so, and I'm just like, I guess what I'm trying to say is it felt like a caricature a little bit, just a little, so I didn't really, I didn't continue on with this. And my quest to find in contemporary romance and fantasy romance more male perspectives will continue on. This quest is currently not completed. I can't get the platinum trophy. Next up, we have for my, I didn't DNF this, but I am unhauling it, would be Guns of the Dawn. Originally, I had checked this out from the library, and then I wanted to do an in-depth review for it, so I have a physical copy, and I put tabs in it, which I will take out, and I think I'm just going to take this to my local bookstore, because if you watched my review, you know I didn't care for it. But I see why other people like it. There's just certain things that on a personal level, I was just like, oh, this doesn't work for me. There's a few scenes that I was like, what? The hide and seek scene in particular. What was that scene? But it doesn't matter. Anyway, last thing for today, I haven't had yet the opportunity to talk about this, so I'm actually going to sort of save thoughts for the next new fantasy releases video that I do, but that would be the City of Stardust. So this edition is quite pretty. Like, it looks like, oh, what are they called? You know, those like unicorn puzzles. Oh my gosh, what is that artist? Like Anne Frank? Is that what it is? It kind of looks like Anne Frank. It's just like sparkly and pretty. Anyway, the first part of this book, and it's literally broken up into, you know, part 1, part 2, that kind of thing. Part 1, I was on board, and then it kind of just was pretty stagnant for the rest of the story, and it didn't really expand, and it kind of ended up being a story that didn't work for me, and I will go more in depth as to why in that new fantasy releases video. But this edition is quite gorgeous, and I will be selling this one as well on Pango, so you can see there's the naked hardback, there's artwork here if you want to reverse this to have it be, instead of this cover, you can swap it around. There's artwork on the inside as far as like this little letter. I liked the writing though, and I would definitely read something else by this author. The book though and its story just didn't really work for me. That's it though for some library saves, some DNFs, and a mini unhaul. If you've read any of the books that I mentioned, feel free to say your thoughts in the comments down below. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.